You're listening to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Two fans, two generations, all things Star Wars begins now.
All right, well, hello, everybody. I'm Eric Vansel.
And I'm Daryl Sanders.
And we're your hosts for this show. And, of course, we're back. Of course, both of us are back. That's actually a good thing, right? After I had to do the thing last week on my own. But took a little detour with D23, and now we are back at our Star Wars Visions Ninth Jedi. Try saying that 3 times fast. Review. This time, of course, we left off. We did episode 1. Now we're on to episode 2. And I think that this is going to actually be something really cool. So far, I have to say, it's a really great series, man. I mean, this is something that's interesting because of the fact that unlike any other Visions project that we've had thus far, this one is one continuous story over multiple episodes. Whereas everything that we've had up until now has been, just like a one and done, kind of an isolated, standalone episode. And it was very conceptual. This one obviously has a lot of good stories to it. So to kick us off, instead of us giving our thoughts, let's have Ted. Let's have Ted open the show this time. Wouldn't it be hilarious if we brought him in? Like, here he is. But Ted, via chat, has some thoughts on this already. He said episode 2 is further proof that if there had never been any Star Wars before this, the Ninth Jedi would be as good of an introduction to this galaxy far, far away than any. Goes on to say, this feels epic and special, and most above else, genuine. Yeah, actually, I concur that there is something that's definitely genuine about this and that it would be a good introduction. I do like the fact that it feels like Star Wars. Whereas with episode 1, it was basically talking about General Noam's like the growing threat and all that stuff. And it was a little bit more about the Jedi and all this, like just basically like the extinction or whatever. This episode was actually focused a little bit more into like building an alliance, right? Where the first one was more like survival and everything. This one's more about building an alliance and basically realizing that, look, the little group that they had, they're not going to be able to win this alone. They got to get help. They got to get more people. And it's interesting because these guys are ordinary people. Usually they would always try to go and find, hey, let's find the best fighters, or maybe we can find some other Jedi or whatever. And this one, they're like a bunch of miners. It's...
Yeah.
So, I mean, I don't know. I think that, and it captured my interest the whole time, and I love the villain in this. I think so far so good. Episode 2.
Yeah, I like the word genuine being used. Because, there's that's what Star Wars has to feel like. It has to feel genuine. And with the lore that Star Wars has already created, this is a continuation of that, and I like that. I like the fact that the story is simple enough yet complex. It has its own complexities to it that so far have really been good. Even like you said, let's find the best fighters, but these are a bunch of miners, right? And that kind of keeps with the theme because we've seen that before in Star Wars with a lot of the freedom fighters. We've seen it before within the Clone Wars, where remember when Obi-Wan and Anakin had to train that one village how to fight? Like they were a very peaceful little race, but then they had to like give them like find these bamboo sticks and make weapons out of them and teach them. And they kind of were teaching them classes how to fight. And,
and
everything.
I mean that's something that, I mean, first of all, that's a a typical thing that you find in a lot of different projects. Like that's the
Sure.
right, like the village is under attack and they gotta, the warrior
Stand up
that's
for
there.
themselves.
Yep, exactly. That whole thing. Because actually, even in the Mandalorian, there was
Hmm.
I think it was the first season, um, where Mando and Grogu were basically like in that little village that
Oh
like
yeah, with
Endor.
the lily
Remember that?
pads, with
And then they had
the
the
yeah,
and then
yeah,
they had the
and that's when they first meet
Skywalker.
Cara Dune. Yeah,
Yeah,
yeah, yeah.
yeah. So I mean, that was a very similar thing too. So it's not even like a stranger in Star Wars. I mean, Star Wars is using
No, I
Star
mean,
Wars. So yeah,
and that's what I mean by genuine because it's keeping to a lot of the things that Star Wars does that it does well, and just kind of finds new ways of um, bringing it forth.
motivating them.
Another one would right. Uh,
I couldn't.
what was the other? It was kind of another one with this dealing with the mining. They had a bunch of Wookiees. You remember
Well, that
that? It
was
was like
Solo.
animation.
No, it was Solo.
That
'Cause remember, K3, whatever what was the droid's name? L3.
L3.
Remember, she wanted to free them all, but basically, like Chewbacca came in and yeah. I mean, it was basically Solo. But yeah, you're right. It was the same concept. Of course, it was a small part of that larger
Right. Yeah.
story. Uh, Ted says certainly miners can fight better than Ewoks.
Yeah, but that's another group though. I'd have the
I don't
Ewoks
know.
though.
Well, I mean, maybe. I don't know, man. Ewoks are pretty vicious, and then they're eating people, and I mean, there's if they really wanted to make Return of the Jedi an R-rated thing, that could have gone in a whole different direction. They're they're not the
Yeah, the
cute,
books
cuddly
actually
creatures.
had depicted them a lot different in a way.
A lot different. Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah.
But yeah, man. I mean, because that's the thing that I think it makes this whole thing unique, right? Is they're not a bunch of force sensitive warriors, but they do believe in like the whole Jedi thing, right? And you know, the fact that the Jedi still matter to some degree. They had to find people that are like that, and that's a little bit different from what we were seeing before, where the Jedi were part of the Republic, and so therefore they were basically like keepers of peace and all that stuff. Here they're basically trying to build up from the ground up, pretty much. So
Hmm.
it's also a little bit of a different thing too, because up until this point, we've either seen one of two things. We've either seen them already established, like in the High Republic era or the Republic era, um, or we've seen things like Luke Skywalker trying to rebuild from scratch, or now Rey. So I mean, you really haven't seen anything quite like this because this is almost like a different kind of a vibe in a lot of ways. Because Luke had a lot of that lineage of the Jedi, and he was basically the only one left. And then kind of the same thing with Rey, although Luke was still around. But here, with Kara and all them trying to like rebuild. I mean, her dad built lightsabers. I mean, there's a little bit of a legacy or a lineage there, but it's just
Hmm.
broken up, and they're trying to basically come together to fight this greater evil. And it's something that, and you've pointed this out, there's a lot of elements that we have seen before, not just in Star Wars, but in a lot of other projects. But then they're doing it in a way that we haven't really seen before, especially in Star Wars.
Yeah, I mean, you mentioned the lineage thing, and you know, Lasso, with being the father and him, building lightsabers and that whole thing. Um, we start to delve a little bit deeper into that as far as dealing with kyber crystals, and that kyber crystals aren't just meant for Jedi, but like there, it kind of has. We kind of get a little bit of a history lesson. We kind of get a little bit of I guess somewhat of a spiritual or religious aspect to it. With because of the connection that you have to have with them. And there's a positive. It can go in a very positive way that we've seen before, but then we also have to remember, these things can be used for evil. Hence the Death Star. And so it just depends on like which side of the force are you really on, and it kind of really emphasizes the force's connection because in a way they're a living thing. These crystals are alive, and I don't think we really think about that because we just know that like, oh, okay, you find you a crystal and plop it in a lightsaber and there you go. But no, these are kind of living entities because the force lives in all living things, and because these things can call out to you, it's not just you just pick a random crystal. No, you have one that's specifically tailored to you that calls out to you. Reinforces, like I said, the whole spirituality part about it. But then it also just shows you how people can take something that was meant for good and completely use it for evil.
Yeah, I mean, 100%. And the thing that I like about it, because there's different elements of this, right? Because on one hand, we talk about the whole like ordinary people, and that's something that's important too, because it's not just made up of like these heroes. And Star Wars actually works better when it connects to the ordinary people, and you see that part of it. Flip side of that, though,
Hmm.
once you start getting into the Jedi and the Sith thing, and now you have the Kyber crystals, because again, seeing a little bit of that Death Star kind of thing going, but used in a different way, of course.
Hmm.
But they've this hidden weapon that they're talking about pretty much is like a Kyber crystal weapon, and I mean this is something that I think you know there's a they basically go back to the whole concept of some sort of a super weapon, but without retreading the same ground. And I think that that's where this becomes a lot more interesting than, say, Starkiller Base, which is essentially a Death Star on steroids. I actually thought that the Expanded Universe did a really good job with these concepts. They had the Sun Crusher, they had some of these other things that were
Hmm.
they were also super weapons, but they were removed enough from the Death Star, you know, that I mean it basically works. And I mean again, I've always been one of those guys that said, look, all these people are like, they're doing this again, they need something new. It's like, well, I mean, if you look at any kind of military thing here on good old Earth, it's basically just improvements over the same thing, still launching missiles. Okay, well, this missile might be like way more powerful or longer range or
Hmm.
whatever. I mean, it's like if you have something like the Death Star, I mean, other than the sheer cost of building this thing, I mean, you gotta
Yeah.
have quite the economy to do it, right? But it stands
Amen to
to
that.
reason that I mean, if this thing could come into existence, that yeah, you're gonna. That was why I was always laughing when people would criticize the fact that Return of the Jedi. It's like, oh, they're doing another Death Star. It's like, well, why wouldn't they?
Yeah.
I mean, it's kind of like you got the resources to do it, dude. You're gonna do it. Same thing with Star Killer Base. I remember a lot of people were, a little like, oh, it's like an actual planet. It's sort of like the Death Star. If the Death Star were a planet, that's what it would
Hmm.
be. And it had this like insane, weapon built into it. I'm like, well, okay, sure. Is it reminiscent of the Death Star? Absolutely. I mean, even when Han
Yep.
Solo was kind of like, well, just do what we did with the Death Star. It's bigger, so what? We'll just blow it up, right? But the thing is, yeah, of course, if you're going to be able to have a situation, whether you're the actual government or not, because the First Order wasn't. But if you have the resources to do it, yeah, you're going to do it. You're going to build something that's like this. So I never really was all that critical of them.
Bent out of shape about it. Yeah.
Yeah, like recycling. Like I don't need to see like these wildly different things because honestly, it's more realistic. Yeah, I mean, if you could, if you could do that, you're gonna do it.
Yeah. I mean, I get people want to see different things or different forms of technology and whatnot, but like you said, you make a very valid point, and I've kind of made the similar point to other people as well, who kind of squawked about it. But it's kind of like, yeah, if you look at good old planet Earth, you know, you got nuclear war. Everyone's terrified of that. That's why we having all these wars now. With people, we're trying to keep certain countries away from having nuclear weapons and things of that nature, and that's been going on since the Cold War. Right? So, we've seen what happened with the atomic bomb and Hiroshima and all these different things like that. But when you're thinking about like, okay, I need a weapon that's going to keep planets in line.
Right.
You need something big enough to do that. I mean, let's now
Now, I
don't get
will
me
say
wrong.
this. I will say this though. Okay, sure, people can say it was cheesy or whatever. The whole idea of having like a fleet of star destroyers that actually have a Death Star laser on it,
I was just about to say
that
that.
that's like next level cool. That actually I think is more effective than just having the single Death Star.
Yeah, most impressive because now you can spread them out, and then they all these star destroyers have hyperdrives on them, so you could there's no, you know, it's
Yeah,
not
and
like
you got
taking a
like a
Death Star
gazillion
like
of them, you know?
yeah,
You could just like
exactly.
disperse them out, and now you've got essentially like every star destroyer could destroy a planet or at least a significant amount of it,
Hmm.
so that would be pretty dangerous. I mean that's
Yeah,
like and that's
I
cool.
thought that was a genius idea. Like, okay, we're gonna equip the star destroyers with the power of a Death Star. I'm like, ooh, that's
Yeah,
scary.
that would be pretty freaky. And again, they kind of blow by the whole thing or whatever. But it's like when you really stop and think about that concept,
Hmm.
that's a really cool concept. And again, I mean, it just, that's why, even though it was cheesy that they brought Palpatine back and everything, I mean, it's sort of like the way that they did it. Maybe not it wasn't a perfect execution, of course. Tons of problems with the Rise of Skywalker, but conceptually speaking, they basically borrowed from the expanded universe, and then at the same time, it would make sense that he would orchestrate some of this.
Hmm.
So from that, it's cool. But again, switching over to this now, this villain, like Palpatine, is not just dangerous in a one-on-one situation or whatever. He's like basically trying to amass power. He's trying to get in. He's trying to get more of a reach. He's basically got that Palpatine-esque kind of a thing where a lot of the Sith before Palpatine were basically just trying to subjugate groups of people or whatever and just be a powerful Sith Lord. Where Palpatine was actually just trying to be like almost like a ruler. He happened to be a Sith Lord. That's how he enforced it, obviously. But he was just like, look, I'm going to get into the political system. I'm pretty much going to
Hmm.
rule legitimately. Like, not as a warlord, but I'm going to get into the government. I'm going to take over the government. And then pretty soon I'm just going to be the emperor. And then, I don't really have to hide behind anything.
Hmm.
And even then he did. It wasn't like he came out and revealed himself as a Sith Lord. He basically was
Nope.
the emperor. He kind of operated behind closed doors. A lot of people still
Send
thought he
Vader to
was.
do all his stuff.
Yeah,
Yeah.
exactly. Vader was like the face of the Sith or whatever. He was kind of like the enforcer. Palpatine never really revealed himself like that, which I actually thought was a brilliant thing that separated him from all the other Sith Lords. And that seems to be where this guy's going in a way, where, he's pretty much moving from like a personal threat, somebody that, is going to be the antagonist to our heroes, to more of a galactic wide threat a la Palpatine, I think.
Yeah, I mean, I think your ambition, especially when you go darker, your ambition is going to be wider. You're always going to want to consume more, right? More power, more reach, like you said. Um, you want a more of a piece of the pie,
Mm,
and I think that's just kind of incumbent upon being a Sith or being a bad guy. It's kind of like you always, your greed is never satisfied.
Yeah. No, that's true. That's true. And I mean, I think that although there does seem to be more that makes this guy tick, like I'm curious on his journey even in subsequent
Mm,
episodes because I don't know, there just seems to be a little bit more there than the whole black and white. I just want to dominate the galaxy. It's like
yeah.
I think that there's something there. And I also think that Kara's leadership on her side of things, she's starting to come into her own a lot more. Um, instead of just basically being the student or the Padawan or whatever, she's now having to inspire people. She's now having to, you know, um, basically like be a little bit more courageous. And I mean, you really have to stop and think about the whole like tone of all of this stuff because one of the things that I really like about her is the fact that things aren't necessarily coming easy to her like they did to Ray. She's really having to grow. She's
Hmm.
really having to like stretch out. She's really trying to embody the Jedi spirit as far as like giving people hope and inspiring people, all that stuff. She's not just simply wielding a lightsaber, which is what, a lot of times when you look at the prequel era, it was sort of like they were operating as a group, right? And now you have these guys acting as kind of like standalone people, a la the original trilogy. And it's like, okay, well, what does it even mean to be a Jedi? And I
Hmm.
mean, that's where I think that she's really starting to grow and really starting to come into her own. And that was very much present in this episode, where she's having to deal with some of the minors too. So, I mean, overall, I think that this has just been a really fascinating uh, thing. And again, we're only in the second episode, and yet you're
Well, that's one
seeing
of
so much development.
yeah. Well, that's one of the things I love about this is that when I was early when we first got on, the little nuances of the storytelling. It's not like, okay, we're asking ourselves, or the characters are asking themselves, what does it mean to be a Jedi? But then now we're at a point where she's having to learn how to trust, and can I trust the ones that I love, even though I may not have the entire picture? Like there's so much richness that kind of goes on the hero's journey that I think we're discovering in these episodes that I think is really good. And I think that's what Star Wars needs. It needs to delve deeper into the hero's journey and put some things under the microscope and to say, like, hey, okay, you're saying I'm this. And it's easy for me just to go, like, okay, let's ray it up a bit and just, okay, I just kind of know what to do. I can use force abilities I've never trained on before. But then there's the struggle of, I think that's what made Luke so powerful was because we saw him struggle with, okay, where do I go from here? I lost Aunt Beru and Uncle Owen. Now I gotta go trust this old guy that I've never seen before. Well, I won't say never seen before, but I've had very little interaction with. Get on a ship with him with a bunch of other people, with uh, Chewie and Han, and then I gotta save some chick that I've never seen before, don't even know of, and then eventually I have to join. I'm joining up with this group that I've heard about, and you're trying to, figure out where you fit in all of this. And then, of course, when we get to Empire, it keeps growing because now we're bringing in the legacy of, okay, Vader and everything like that. And, so there's a lot that I love about when you start to delve into these little nuances. To me, that's what makes, good storytelling.
Yeah, I mean, I would even dare say that this actually, in a lot of ways, feels more creative than the current canon does. That
Hmm.
there's, because of precisely what you're talking about, that there's basically, like, it's not just the world building, it's not just all the stuff that we would expect, from any kind of project. You have to do that. I mean, even though we're pretty familiar with it, we're not familiar with this era, this aspect, this location. So you still have to do some
Iteration of
world
it.
and yeah,
Right.
exactly. So you still have to do a little bit of world building and all that stuff. But what I really like is that they're delving into character. There's a lot of character
Yeah.
development.
Character development. Yes.
And that's why, I mean, again, so far both of these episodes are really good. I mean, I don't know if I would say that episode 2 is a vast improvement over 1. I think it's a serious continuation though.
Continuation. Yeah.
And I think that it's delving deeper into it, and it feels cohesive. That's the other thing too, is that you don't
Mm.
necessarily feel like, you know,
Good word. Yeah.
sort of like the episodes are maybe not disjointed. That might not necessarily be the word, but it almost feels like I said, it's a huge continuation. I think that that's awesome. Ted says so much world building that's not coming across as forced.
Hmm.
And that's another good point. It's like it's not forced and it's not shoehorned into things. And that was part of the problem I think with the sequel trilogy is everything felt, you know, wasn't even so much forced, although you could certainly use that term and I wouldn't have a problem with it. I mean, I think it does somewhat hit the nail on the head in a lot of ways, but I think shoehorned is a little bit better because what they're trying to do is cram all this lore into each of those 3 movies because they had a lot that they were trying to do. I think what they probably should have done is maybe just pare down the story a little bit and they could have done it. They could have almost mirrored the original trilogy in that sense.
Mm.
Because if you think about it, the original trilogy really was somewhat of a microcosm. I mean, you got the feel of a much larger world, but you didn't have to show like every aspect of it. You basically saw it through the lens of Han, Luke, Leia, 3PO, R2, this small group of people, and basically their journey through this much larger world. And I think that that's what's happening here is that you have a small group of people and you're getting exposed to this larger world, and it's like Ted said, you're not really seeing it being forced. It's a very organic, not an overused word, but it really is. It's like a very natural flow. It's a very natural type of a feeling, and you're not overwhelmed with a ton of information. That's the problem that I remember you and I had, like, even Rogue One, and we love Rogue One to death.
Hmm.
But I remember when, they kept showing like all these planets and you leaned over me and you're like, dude, I need like a guide to even keep up with. Like, we're only like 5 minutes into this
He's into the
movie and
stupid thing.
I've
Yeah.
got,
They're like
right. And I've got
on
like,
Jeddah. They're over here. Like,
I've got like 6 planets I got to keep track of. I got all these characters. It's like, you're just basically being overwhelmed with all this information, all this exposition. And I mean, sometimes that can overwhelm you. And I like the fact that with this, it's a very, very smooth type of a thing.
yeah. I mean, I think that's what's needed in again Star Wars, and I think again I'm thinking that the Ninth Jedi is a uh, I don't want to say a template, but maybe a guide to future. Like, okay, like let's take these what works here and now apply it to live action because I think these things are resonating with people. And um when you have things where, like you said, the world building, I mean that's one of the things we love about Andor was
Yep.
the world building. Like they really built that, built that, especially season 1. they really built out the world. And to some people felt like it was way too slow, which I can understand. However, I think the payoffs that we had in certain episodes really made up for it.
Well,
And
particularly in subsequent seasons, right? I mean, season one
yeah,
in particular had to be a little bit more drawn out and slow, so that way season two could make more sense and have a bigger impact.
yeah, and you can kind of flow through that through season two a little bit faster.
Hmm.
Um, so yeah, I mean, I think that like you said, the character development, I think that's really key. We're starting to see um, character motivations and you know um, what they're dealing with in their heads and how it affects or how it pertains to the circumstances that they're in. I think that's um,
Well, yeah. What I
really
like
well done so far.
exactly, and I think that part of what illustrates that is that we're basically seeing that the whole idea of rebuilding the Jedi is more than just training a bunch of Force users. You're basically seeing like kind of a wider thing in the sense of instead of it being like, okay, you're force sensitive, we're going to train you, blah blah blah. It's more like what you were talking about, where it's like, okay, these people are getting hope. There's more to the Jedi than just wielding a lightsaber and maybe using the Force. It's the idea. There's like it basically represents hope in the galaxy too, right? Because it's like, who else are you going to turn to? Um, I just think that you could also look at it because the episode's called the hidden weapon. You could say that okay, the obvious would be this kyber weapon that was introduced, but you could even make an argument that the miners are the hidden weapon. That it's like when these people, ordinary people, band together and rise up, and that's kind of what the rebellion was. I mean, everybody thinks of the rebellion as some of the military people that were there, and also like Han, Luke, Leia, and all that. But I mean, if you really think about it, if you remember, a lot of it was especially the attack on the Death Star. It's like, look, if you have any piloting experience, we want to use you, right? A bunch of
Almost
farmers
like
and
kind of remind me of Independence Day. Like, hey,
yeah, it was very much like that. It was very much like that. And I mean, and again, it's basically like a similar thing where you have these desperate people that are standing up to this military power, and there's something that's inspirational, which is why this type of story keeps getting retold in a lot of different films, not even related to Star Wars. He just brought up Independence Day. That's a good
hmm
example. So I mean, there's basically like a nice it's a nice setup, I think, to what is coming. I'm really I'm really interested to see where this actually goes. Because this is what, 8 episodes, right?
yeah,
And so I honestly think that only being in episode 2 and it's funny because I wouldn't even call this a slow build. It's more like a smooth build. Like it's building fairly quickly, but it's being done in a more gradual, tempered way.
hmm
And I like that. Because again, you basically have this thing, you know, divided up into say 3 or 4 segments. Hera and Juno or Juro need allies. They turn to these asteroid miners. The Wam's threat is growing, and you have this hidden like kyber weapon, right? So I mean, that's basically like kind of the gist of this. And again, this is another thing that I really do like about this project is they're keeping the storytelling simple.
simple. Yeah,
They're not killing you with a bunch of information or exposition. They're not trying to introduce like, a bunch of different characters or whatever. They're keeping it very simple. And if you think about it, the original trilogy, especially A New Hope, it was a very simple story, like a
Very
very
simple.
basic story, right? And
Yeah.
so yeah, and again, I mean, now you're dealing with something that's a little bit beyond the Jedi. The miners are giving the episode, it's a little bit more grounded, right? Again, this isn't I think they're doing a good balance between the lore and the war type of a thing in this project too. Like there's definitely the Jedi, Sith, all the mystical elements of it. But it's still it's done in a very grounded way, you know? Stakes are grounded, like everything's pretty
Yeah.
much grounded in this. Quanta adds, like, he's a good ally. You brought this up earlier about the Kyber mythology, and it's being
Yeah.
handled well, giving everything weight. I mean, I think that, so far so good.
Yeah. I mean, like I said, I'm really uh, eager to see, what else do they bring us, and how they, keep crafting, this story. Um, Even with Kara's dad, not being who she thinks he is, and just little things like that. It's just there's a lot uh, of ways it can go, but they're not. Uh, it's almost kind of like basketball. Like there's a bunch of ways you can score, but you find the most direct, efficient way of scoring, and I think that's kind of what they're doing right here.
No, and I think that's true because another word that I would use to describe this show is streamlined. Like I don't find
Yes,
there to be a lot of bloat.
very
There's not a
streamlined.
lot of
Yes,
weight. It's
it's not a
very
fluff. Yeah.
yeah. It's a very streamlined thing, and I think that that's a pretty cool thing. And I also think that they could start to tackle the questions, and they're seemingly starting to go there. I don't know if they're going to consciously do this or not, but are they going to address, you know, should like the next Jedi Order be more isolated and connected to the people versus connected to the government and
Hmm.
being kind of like a sort of like a military police kind of, it's like they could start to explore these themes and I mean that might be where it's going. I don't know. I mean the cool thing about it is again, we're only 2 episodes in and I always say this like every review that we do, I mean, usually they drop the first 2 episodes and all the live action stuff. They drop the first 2 episodes at once. And generally, of course, we review them and then we have to remind everybody that's watching, like, look, guys, don't go too crazy. It's like if there's things that people don't like, it's like don't go too nuts and even if you
I
do
would
like
too.
something, the danger is the first 2 episodes are amazing and you think that that's the direction of the whole show and it might not be. I mean,
Hmm.
it's and in some cases, like there have been shows where they've just knocked it out of the park until the last episode or two.
Yeah.
So, I mean, you have to really be careful. Now, again, this is a little bit different because much like all the other Vision seasons, they basically release this thing all at once.
Right.
And being that they're only half-hour episodes, I'd be, willing to bet even a lot of people that are watching our channel right now may have seen them all. So, it's kind of like they
Hmm.
basically know where the whole thing is going. We've decided to review these things one at a time because we think, and so far so good, each of these episodes basically deserves its own thing.
Review.
Yeah,
Yeah.
its own review because there's a lot of meat into it, and the problem is it's almost like if you're gonna do it, you'd almost have to do it as either the entire series or an episode at a time. Now, Andor, of course, they had released each of those in like little trilogies. So that was kind of cool. I really like that. But for this, I mean, I think this is good, and I think that so far, at least with the first two episodes, they're delivering what they should be, and it's amazing to finally have something that has the Vision's name on it be like this super cool show that we're totally into. Even though, I mean, it should be noted that yes, like season 2 was kind of like that bridge season, and then season 3 we actually legitimately liked. Like we were no longer grading on a curve or anything like. Well, if it was a normal project, we would give it like a 3, but because it's a Visions thing, we're gonna give it a 7. It's none of that. This and this one especially because again, it's different. It's a cohesive, it's an actual series. It's not just a bunch of random episodes. This I think is really good, and I dare say it's amazing because it has the Vision's name on it. But I dare say that this could represent a new direction for Star Wars because this is the first time we're seeing something that really doesn't take place around the Skywalker side.
True. What would you rate this?
And it's so difficult, because I'm probably gonna give it like an
8.
yeah, I think I'm gonna give it. And the reason
Okay.
being is because look, the reality is, as much as I'm talking this thing up, and as much as I'm saying, hey, it's a continuation of episode 1, blah blah blah. Objectively speaking, it is a bridge episode. Like, I have a feeling that when we see episode 3, we're probably going to be like, okay, episode 2 is literally bridging us between 1 and 3. Or maybe 2 and 3 end up being kind of like a cohesive bridge, and then, 4 or whatever. But this seems like one of those like transitional type episodes to me. But that's
Hmm.
part of the reason why I'm giving it such a high rating is because usually those kind of episodes either underwhelm me or bore me. Like I recognize the
Yeah.
necessity of them. Like every time, there's an episode in a series where it's an obvious bridge, right?
Hmm.
They're necessary. I mean, I'll be the first person to admit it. It's like, okay, yeah, I get it. You have to, transition in the story. This has to be done. Okay, fine. But generally speaking, I more like tolerate those episodes and then I glean whatever I can, from the story that I know is going to get me to the next point. This episode, though, I actually liked it as a standalone episode. And that's amazing considering the fact that it's technically, it seems like anyway. I mean, I don't know. I guess we'll find out next week, but it seems like it's a.
Okay. I'm gonna give it a 7.5, 7.5. Just because it's early.
It is
So I
early.
kind of want to say the bigger numbers for, you know, like when we get, because I feel like we haven't really gotten into like the meat of it yet. I think like maybe around episode 5, 6, somewhere around there. That's when it's really gonna, hopefully, like really bloom and blossom. And I think that's what I want to reserve those numbers for. But yeah, I mean, I agree with you though. I mean, most transitional episodes aren't really that interesting or entertaining, but this was. So I'm with you, but I'm still kind of playing it safe.
Well, it's only like a half a point deduction, so it's
True.
not playing it that safe.
Hey, hey. Just saying.
But hey, I mean, you never know, right? And I mean, I get it. I should have just been like, oh, I give this a 10. But I mean, it's, but it does again. I mean, first of all, keep in mind, we're giving like Visions stuff like high rank, right? But
Right.
I think it's a testament to how well this show has begun that we are giving it high ratings. And again, I also, the other thing too is I try not to punish episodes like the earlier episodes simply because they're earlier episodes. Because you do bring up a really good point. Usually the earlier episodes are like the setup, and then you get more of the payoff and the meat of a story in the middle to end. But it's actually easy to I think it's easy to punish sometimes the earlier episodes with lower numbers simply because they're the earlier episodes and they're establishing things. It's sort of like kind of how I feel about episode 4, right? Like New Hope. I don't usually rewatch the origin movies because I just want to
Hmm.
start watching where everybody already knows each other and, so
Hmm.
it's kind of like, when you have to like watch like an ensemble thing and everybody's meeting each other for the first time again and getting used to each other. It's like, okay, I mean, I've already seen like 6 movies where these guys have like had multiple adventures. I don't want to see the origin thing. But, you know, it basically you can't punish it because it was like an origin thing, and that's kind of what I'm doing here. Now Ted says, "I'm giving I thoroughly enjoyed it and not a number." Go figure. Uh in addition to that, he says, "It definitely has me wanting to come back for more." And honestly, that's really all you can ask for any kind of a series. It's like, dudes, each episode make you want to see the next one.
Hmm.
And if the answer is yes, now granted, you could sit there and discuss to what degree. I mean, it's like, I'm kind of curious on what's next, or oh man, I can't wait to, see the next one. So there are varying degrees in there, but at the same time, whatever the degree, if you're on board for the next one, that means it's doing its job. And not every story can be, where you're giving away like all these exciting things like in the beginning. And I mean, sometimes you do have to pace yourself, and not everything is going to be like super exciting all the time. You have to let stories breathe. It's funny because sometimes I'll watch older movies, and you're just sitting there going like, "Wow, dude, that's." I mean, you're so used to everything being so breakneck speed and fast pace, and a lot of cuts that you watch some movies from the '70s, and you're just like, dude,
Get on with it already.
it's so slow. But when you really stop and look at it, that's when movies were real, though. It's like people had the patience to
Hmm.
actually see development and taking its time and things like that. And I think it's an art that's been lost to some degree. And I
Yeah.
think that's a bad thing, ultimately. I don't necessarily see that as a good thing, but that's what we think of this. The important question, of course, is what you guys think. Well, you know what Ted thinks. But what about the rest of you? The ones that decided not to watch us live this time? That's what we want to know. Did you guys like episode 2 as well, better, or not as well as episode 1? What story parts do you guys enjoy? What are some of the things that maybe you don't like? Let us know in the comments. And of course, join our Discord. The Discord, we discuss a lot of this stuff. In fact, I'm hoping that one of the things that Grandmaster does is let us know how this show is doing. He's been giving us numbers on a lot of things. I'd be very curious to see how this is performing with the audience, both numbers wise and just like regular, are people into it or not?
Hmm.
So let us know. Obviously, next week, we're going to be back for episode 3. We're in it for the long haul. Again, last week, D23, I mean, it was so big that we had to address it. Like, we had to interrupt this to address it. And again, I mean, there's some earth shattering news, like, hey, we're going to make the Timothy Zahn trilogy as movies and starting in 2030 or something like that, then yes, obviously, we're going to take another break from this and cover that. But barring any earth shattering or Tatooine shattering news, um, we're going to be back here for episode 3 next week, and then subsequently until this thing is done. So it should take us into September, probably toward the end of September, because we've got like 6 more episodes to review. So it might even take us into October a little bit. So hopefully you guys are enjoying this series because we're going to be reviewing it. All right, so is that it? You got anything else you want to say?
No, that's it.
All right, well, with that, we will see you next time. Don't forget to hit that like button, that subscribe button, because you guys know it helps the channel when you do that. And of course, you can go on our buymeacoffee.com site, throw us a couple of bucks, or even join as a member. You can see all that information in the description if it interests you. But hey, even non-monetarily, we just like if you guys like the video, subscribe, hit that notification bell. Again, we had to delay it by a half hour again today, so you gotta keep up with us. we're kind of like those those villains. Like some movies will have it to where the base is like in a new spot like every time or something. That's kind of how our stream is. We aim for Sundays at 8, but we don't always make it. So, that's why sometimes the audience takes the hit. But if you hit that notification bell, much like what obviously Ted did, you'll always know when we're live, and you'll always be able to join us and chat with us. So with that, I'm Eric Vansel.
I'm Daryl Sanders.
May the Force be with you.
Always.
Head to Head, a Star Wars podcast. Be sure to follow us on Twitter @HeadToHeadSW. Submit your questions for our next show. Visit our official website at headtoheadswpodcast.com. Until next time, may the Force be with you, always.